This is FERPA training for Eudora schools. Away we go. Well, let's start off with what is FERPA. Right down there in the corner, it stands for Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. So this is the law. And what does it do? And why do we talk about it in schools? Does a couple things. Protects students and their right to privacy. That's first and foremost. It gives parents and the rights to see student information. They can access their kids' information. Also, the right of parents and adult age students to inspect and receive a copy of their own records. So it's not like we're hiding something from students. And also the right to deny access to others, specifically those outside of the school system. So we're not just giving information, personal records, to anyone who wants them. It even says, with some exceptions, there are a few, but we have to be very careful about who we're doing that to, who we're giving information about students to, so they don't use it for ill-gotten gains. Yep, moving on. This is where I work, Eudora schools. This next page, we're gonna look at Eudora school policies in terms of FERPA. I'm not going to read all this, but there's some bolded parts that I thought were of note. It says, when records include information on more than one student, parents and guardians of any student shall have access to copies of that part of the record. So we can see right here that Eudora schools are specifically outlining who can see these records and who cannot, in accordance with FERPA law. Moving on down a couple paragraphs. When a student attains 18 years of age, the permission or consent required of the rights and accorded to the parents of the student shall thereafter only be required of and accorded to the student. So, 18, we're determining, is an adult. So they have their own rights, even if they're still in public education, the public education system. And then lastly, the parents, guardians, and students of the students, if they are 18 years of age or older, shall be informed annually by the superintendent of the rights accorded to them by this section and by the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. Yep, so it's kind of the same thing, that only them, even if they're 18, are afforded the right to look at their information and should be given their own records and information when they ask for it. So looking at this, although it's brief, Eudora does seem to be adhering to the law. Good for us. Here's a handy sheet that says how schools can be compliant, as we seek to abide by the law. How do we do that, and how do we ensure that we're making the right decisions for students and for staff? Well, here's some. All of them I'm not going to go over, but a couple of them I am. Number one is raise awareness of what FERPA is. Some people might not have any idea that there's laws pertaining to student privacy and confidentiality. So we need to make it aware through professional learning, through courses. We need to make them aware. And then let them know that it does apply to them. It does apply to teachers and how they handle student records. Third, we need to know the law. We need to know what rights and protections there are and what exceptions there are. Number 5 there, I think, is important. Train all school employees. A brief yearly training on FERPA could be important, just to keep that, kind of in the back of our minds as we kind of wrestle with, can I share this information? Can I not? Well, if we continue to go over that stuff on a yearly basis, we might learn a little more about those. And the last one was number 7, the encrypt files and emails, especially as we move to a digital age. I think it's important that we are protecting all that data. And how are we doing that? What programs, what systems do we have? What technology are we using to ensure that that's not being hacked or whatever for someone else's use? So that's 8 ways, or at least 5 ways, that we can continue to make sure we're compliant. Moving on, how else we can make sure we're in compliance? It kind of talks about vendors on the previous page as well, like who is getting information from our schools, and we need to be aware how we're distributing information and who's seeing that. Similarly, how the records are released and how we just talk to one another, even just in casual conversation. Some information doesn't need to be passed from adult to adult, or student to adult, adult to student, vice versa. And also, today, with more and more cameras in buildings, there have been issues of surveillance and how those cameras are being used and looked at, and what that video footage is showing and who's seeing it. So there's plenty of laws and regulations that go on about that. In addition, just like the previous slide talking about yearly training, we need to be making this like a regular learning process, a learning professional learning, that's what I was looking for, a professional learning opportunity every year, so that we're just aware of the rules and the regulations. Moving on. And FERPA in the digital age, FERPA and the digital age. I'm going to read both of these to us because I thought they were very well said. Digital record keeping has replaced traditional paper files. We even kind of talked about that. Classroom assignments and assessments are often delivered online via laptops. Teachers are using social media platforms. Websites and free apps in class are being used. And many operational functions historically performed by schools are now outsourced remotely. So what used to be a pen and paper world is now on hard drives and in iClouds. So we need to transition from locked file cabinets to locked email sources and encrypted files, those things, because that's where the majority of our crimes are being committed and data is being lost and hacked. It's now online. No one's breaking into the file cabinets at the schools anymore. This other quote: as a result of all this, students generate enormous amounts of sensitive electronic data about themselves every day, not all of which is clearly protected by federal law. But students are all over the computer and the internet, and there's so much information about them out there that we need to teach them how to be safe, but also make sure that we are being safe and protecting them as well as we can. Yep. And here's some tips on how we can do that for parents and students. Read everything. Don't sign stuff that you don't know you're talking about. Question why information might be requested. Number 4, ask for a copy of the student or school or district policy. And then number 5, the most important in my opinion, teach your child to tell you about surveys, questionnaires, and anything that's going on. Ask how you can opt out of these things. And you can always contact your school and ask. And here's my references, and that for the most part sums up FERPA and just how we need to be more aware of it. And thank you for your time.